Hello everyone, and welcome to week 7 of campCODE. This week we're going to be continuing the project we started last week about ecosystems, and this week we're going to be focusing on aquatic ecosystems, so that's little bubbles of life under the water. And this week we're going to also continue doing our events and do a bit more practice on those, as well as learn about something called scripts, which we actually used a little bit during our chicken catching game a few weeks back. So let's get started by going on to Scratch. I have my profile loaded up in the background here because in case you didn't save our last project, this is how you'll be able to work or follow along today. So I have my featured project, which is lesson 6, or you can find it down on the bottom as well. We just click on that. And I'm also gonna click on you should have a remix button, but since this is on my account, I have an option to see inside for all of the code. And I'm gonna go into the file option and I'm just gonna save a copy. So now I'm able to work on this without messing anything up from my first copy that I had, my original. Let's get started by going over some of the code that we did last week. I know that functions can be a bit confusing to use and we have quite a lot of code, so I'm just going to do a quick overview of what all of these functions I made do and also all of the events that we've made. So, starting off, our Scratch the Cat, we have code to first, when the green flag is clicked, have him go to this position on the left-hand side here, and then say, "Hello, I'm Scratch the Cat. I can't wait to start my eco adventure. Where should I go?" Then I have this code right here. That is my function I made that I called "Where should I go?" And I made this function because we're going to be asking where I should go and giving you options and reacting to those options multiple times in our game today. So on the right hand side where I placed it over here, I defined my "Where should I go" function. And in my function, I have him ask us where he should go, giving us options of forest, grassland, desert, or tundra. And then have all of these if statements that respond to each of those different places. So if my answer is forest, then I'm going to switch over to a forest backdrop that I selected and then broadcast a message I called forest. And just the same with all of these other options here. So this is the grassland one over here, this is the desert one over here, and this is the tundra one over here. And once I switch the backdrops, then I broadcast the message and the message is received by one of these sprites down at the bottom here. So the bear is in the forest backdrop. So when I click on the bear's code, when the green flag is clicked, he's initially hiding because we start our adventure in Scratch's bedroom and we don't want him to show up there. Then when I receive that forest message that I broadcasted when somebody types in forest as their answer, then we show up, we rotate to the left and right towards the 90 or negative 90 direction to face Scratch the Cat, and then we go to the position right to the right of Scratch. Then the bear will say his little comment about the forest ecosystem and how there are lots of different forests depending on climate, and then he says thanks for visiting and he'll hide afterwards. And that's because when we go back to Scratch the Cat's code and we go to the piece of code that I made that says when I receive forest, I play this code that I made a function for called where to next. And when I look for where I defined that where to next function right up here, this makes Scratch the Cat, when I get that message forest, to wait 10 seconds for the bear to finish his whole talk about the forest. Then he's going to say, "Wow, I learned a lot. Where should I go next?" And then we're going to run that "Where should I go" function. So there is a function within this function called where to next. And that function will again ask us where we should go and give us all of these options again. So it's a little bit circular and it's a little bit confusing. If it is too confusing for you, I would just take all of this code and put it in here instead, like so. Get rid of that. And I would just repeat all these 3 pieces of code when I receive all of these different messages. But I just made it into its own function to make it easier to look at, because then we have less code to look at on our screen. And this happens with all of the different sprites. So we have the lion doing the same thing, except it tells us about the savanna grasslands. The hare talks about the desert. And lastly, the polar bear talks about the tundra, the Arctic tundra. So let's get started with our code today on the underwater or aquatic ecosystems. So first, we're going to add our aquatic ecosystem options to our where should I go function. So right now, when he asks where he should go, he gives us the option of forest, grassland, desert, or tundra. And we're going to add to these our freshwater ecosystem and our marine ecosystem. And the freshwater is just water with no salt in it, and marine would be something like the ocean, which does have salt in it. So let's add that to our ask question. I'm going to reword it so that it says, tell me where I should go: forest, grassland, tundra, comma, freshwater, or marine, and leave that question mark there. Next, I'm going to add my if statement. So I'm going to go into my control blocks. I'm going to grab that if statement and put it down on my list of other if statements. And I'm going to set the condition with my operator. So I'm going to go to my operator blocks, grab my equals operator, change the answer that I want it to be equal to freshwater, and grab my answer block from the sensing area here to go in there. So if my answer is freshwater, I want it to switch over to a freshwater backdrop and also broadcast this new message I'm going to call freshwater. So let's go into our stage area to choose a new backdrop for our freshwater message. I'm going to stay on this page and scroll down because I know there's a few good ones. This water and rocks backdrop is good, but I'm going to use this wetland backdrop down here, like so. So next, I'm going to go into my looks blocks and code for this background change, and I'm going to get the block that says switch backdrop to, and I'm going to put it inside of my if statement and drop down and make sure that I'm changing it to the wetland backdrop. Next, I'm going to go into my event blocks and broadcast my new message, and I'm going to call that freshwater, like so. Now that I have it moving over to the new backdrop and broadcasting that new message, I'm going to have to add a sprite or a little animal to explain the freshwater ecosystem to Scratch the Cat. So I'm going to choose a sprite down the bottom right. I'm going to click on animals, and I'm going to choose something that lives in a freshwater ecosystem, and that would be maybe this cute frog over here. I'll do the cartoony one. And I'm going to have this frog sit on a lily pad, and I want this frog to also be facing the left-hand side, just like with the other ones. So let's start coding for this frog. We're already in the event blocks, so I'm going to grab 2 of my event blocks, just like we did last week with our terrestrial animals. I'm going to grab that when green flag is clicked block, and I'm going to grab that when I receive block and change that drop down to make sure it's when I receive that freshwater message. And now let's get started coding for the actual actions. So when the green flag is clicked, just like all the other animals, we want it to be hidden while we're in Scratch's bedroom at the very beginning of this game. So I'm going to go into looks, going to grab that hide block, and we're also going to have to grab that show block, and we're going to make him show up again when we receive this freshwater message. So I'm going to put this under here. Next, I want to put a motion block so I can tell it where to start in a position of X 101, Y -6. So I have my go to block. And while we're in the motion blocks, we're also going to make him point in the correct direction. So first we have to set the rotation style to a left and right so he doesn't rotate upside down to the left hand side, and then we're going to after point in direction -90, like that. So let's give this a test by clicking on the green flag. We have Scratch the Cat introduce himself, and then when he asks us where should I go, I'm going to say freshwater. And we see that Scratch the Cat and this frog have now shown up, and this frog is on the lily pad underneath there. Now we're going to code for our information about the freshwater ecosystem. So I'm going to go into my look blocks. I'm going to grab that say hello for 2 second block, and I'm going to change the text to say, welcome to the wetlands. Freshwater ecosystems can have still water like in ponds or running water like in rivers. And then I'm going to have them say, thanks for visiting. So it's a bit of a long sentence. Remember, all the scripts will be in the in my profile in the project page. So let's get started typing his message. So, welcome to the wetlands. Freshwater ecosystems can have still water like in ponds or running water like in rivers. And I'm going to have him say this part for maybe around 8 seconds because it's a lot of text. And then I'm going to grab another say hello for 2 second block. And I'm going to say instead, thanks for visiting. And I'm going to leave it on for 2 seconds. Lastly, we have to remember that after he's done talking, we want him to disappear so he won't show up in our next ecosystem we go to. So I'm going to go down in our look blocks and grab that hide again at the very end of his code. Perfect. So now let's test this out really quickly. So I'm going to click on the green flag, let him go through his whole spiel. And we're going to the freshwater again. And we see the frog welcoming us to the wetland freshwater ecosystem and thank us for visiting. And then he'll disappear. Perfect. Now we have to have Scratch react to this information. So we're going to go into Scratch's code over here. And we're going to do another one of these, the where to next codes, because the where to next, as a reminder, makes us wait 10 seconds for the frog to talk. And then he'll say, wow, I learned a lot. Where should I go next? And then we're going to run that where should I go function again. So it asks us all those options again. So I'll code for this by going to my events, grabbing that when I receive block, just like with the frog. And we're going to drop down to the freshwater option. And then we're going to go into my blocks and grab that where to next block again, like so. All right, that is our freshwater ecosystem all coded for. Next, we're going to do our very last one, which is a marine ecosystem, and that is a ocean ecosystem basically. And we're going to do this first by adding our if statement. And this is actually where we're going to learn about scripts. So if I answer one of these options, forest, grassland, desert, tundra, freshwater, or marine, I'll go to all of these different backdrops and broadcast all these different messages. But if I answer something else, nothing happens and you'll have to restart the whole project. So I'm going to teach you how to be able to answer, first of all, if you put in the incorrect input. So if I put in like space or something and there's no option to go to space in this game, then we're going to say that's not a valid option, please try again. And then we'll have that question pop up again and again until we get a correct answer. So that obviously sounds like we're going to use a loop, which we are. And also we're going to use that if else statement for our marine ecosystem. So just trust me here. We're going to go to the control blocks and grab that if else block and put it just in the coding area, not attached to anything. Next, we're going to do just like what we did with the other if statements. We're going to say if my answer is equal to marine, then I'm going to go to a marine backdrop and also broadcast a message I'm going to call marine. So how we do that is first going to our operators and grabbing our equals operator and changing the answer to marine, M-A-R-I-N-E, and grabbing my answer block from sensing. Then I'm going to have to choose my marine backdrop. So on the bottom right, we're going to choose a backdrop. We're going to go underwater. So I'm going to go to the right hand side underwater. And I'm going to choose underwater 2 because we haven't used that yet. So this is the underwater marine backdrop. And I'm going to code for that change by going to my look blocks, grabbing my switch backdrop to and drop down to underwater 2. And I'm also going to add my event where I broadcast a new message I'm going to call marine. Like so. Next, I'm going to have to add a sprite to talk about the marine ecosystem. So I'm going to choose a sprite at the bottom right, go to animals again, and scroll down until I see a cool animal, like maybe a shark. I'll have this shark over here. And it's a big shark. I'm going to drag him over so he's not covering Scratch. And we're going to code for this shark just like we did with all of the other animals by grabbing our when green flag is clicked and when I receive blocks from the event area. I'm going to drop down to make sure I change it to when I receive the marine message. And I'm going to go into my look blocks to code for when he hides at the very beginning when the green flag is clicked. And then he's going to show up once I get that message marine. Since he's also facing the wrong direction, we're going to have him flip around by going to our motion blocks. I'm going to have code also for his current position right now. So I'm going to grab my go to block at x78, y -12. Flip him left and right. So set rotation style to left, right, and point in direction -90. Like so. And so now I'm going to add my facts about the marine ecosystem. So I'm going to go into my looks blocks, grab my say hello for 2 second block, and replace that text with welcome to the coral reef marine ecosystem. Marine is the most common type of ecosystem on Earth. And then we're going to have them say that's because more than half the Earth is ocean. So let's get started typing this. Welcome to the coral reef marine ecosystem. Period. Marine is the most common type of ecosystem on Earth. And we're going to have them say that for 6 seconds. And then we're going to add our second say for 2 seconds block. And we're going to change that text to say, that's because more than half the Earth is ocean, an exclamation mark. And we're going to put that on for 3 seconds. And then after he says his little fact about the marine ecosystem, we're going to have him hide again. So we're going to grab that hide block and put it at the very end. All right, and now we're going to have to code for Scratch's reaction. So we're going to go back to Scratch the Cat's sprite code. Going to scroll over here. In our list of all these reactions to the different messages, we're going to add one more in the event blocks. We're going to grab that when I receive block and switch it over to when I receive the marine code. And I'm going to put my block in for where to next. All right, so now let's go back to our if statements. where we're going to learn about using scripts to repeat the message until a certain answer is given. And we have all of our regular if statements to the left over here, down at the underneath the where should I go function. And we also have this marine function, or the marine if statement, that I haven't put inside yet. And that's because we're actually going to be putting it at the very top of our code, right underneath the ask block. So the reason why we're doing this is because we're going to make it the option to say, if you don't answer all of these different answers that we give you, then we're going to say, sorry, that's not a valid option. Please try again. So what we do is, if the answer is equal to marine, then we're going to switch to the marine underwater 2 backdrop and then broadcast marine. And if not, or else, if your answer is all of these different things, we're going to put inside of that else area, that little C that has the else in it, then we're going to do all these other things. So if the answer is forest, then we're going to switch the backdrop to forest and broadcast the forest message, and so on with all of these different other messages. But at the very end, we're also going to add the option to, if it's not any of these different answers, we're going to put in a looks block. So we say for 2 seconds, and we're going to put it at the end of the if statements, but inside of that large else, if else statement still, we're going to have them say, that's not a valid answer. Please try again. And we're going to have them say it for 3 seconds. So right now, if I test this out, we're going to push on the green flag. It's going to say, hello, I'm Scratch the Cat. I can't wait to start my eco adventure. Where should I go? And then it's going to ask us where it wants us to go, or where we want it to go. So I'm going to say marine to test out my marine ecosystem. We're going to have the shark explain that the coral reef is a marine ecosystem and that half the earth is ocean, and then disappear. And then he's going to ask where he should go next. So we're going to give all these options, but we're going to say something that is not in one of these options. So we're going to say space. We're going to go to space. But since that's not a valid answer, he'll say, that's not a valid answer. Please try again. But you'll also see there's a slight problem because there's no option to try again. It's not giving us that ask question again. So when we want things to repeat over and over again, we use loops. And that's what we're going to do in order to make it loop that question if we don't receive the right answer. So we're going to go into our control blocks. We're going to loop it forever because you might repeat the wrong answer over and over again for whatever reason. And we're going to put it actually all the way around all of our code. So I put everything inside of that forever loop. The ask, the if statements, and the if else statement, that's all inside. It goes all the way to the bottom. Everything is on a loop. So let's test this out one more time. And I'm going to do that just by clicking on our function. So I just want to test that one piece of code, and I can do that by just clicking on that piece of code. So it's asking us where we want to go this time. And we're going to say space again. So something that's not expected. And it says, that's not a valid answer. Please try again. And then we see now that we do get asked the same question again because we have that question on a loop. And now if I put in tundra, you'll see that it has gone to the tundra, but there is a slight issue of all of this code is still running. So this forever loop is still going on even after he's gone to the tundra and answered one of the questions correctly. And the way we stop this loop, or I'm going to call it this script, is we're going to go into the control blocks. And we've used this block before. It's called stop all, and we used it during our chicken catching game in order to stop all of the code inside of my project. But what I want to do is just stop the code that is used to rotate and ask my question over and over again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this script and I'm going to put that underneath after I switch the backdrop and go to the marine and broadcast that marine message. I'm going to stop this script, so this loop. So I need to do this for all of my different ecosystems so that when I go to each one of them, after I switch the backdrop and broadcast my new message, that I will stop this loop. So let's grab this, stop this script block. I'm going to change it over here so I can just drag and drop it underneath all of these different broadcast blocks. Like so. All right, so now let's try to test this out again. We're going to click on our block. It's going to ask me, or I'm going to stop this, and then I'm going to click on my block, and then it's going to ask me where I should go, all of these different options. I'm going to say space again, and it says that's not a valid answer. Please try again. So I'm going to go this time to the forest. And we see that this script on our coding area, it's no longer highlighted in yellow, and the highlighted in yellow is the code that's running. You'll see on the left hand side here, the where to next code is sort of highlighted in yellow for a second, and that's because it was running. So now we have this code running again after the bear talked, so we know that our code seems to be working. So that's all of our code for today, and I'm going to do a quick explanation because I know it was very confusing. So in this define where should I go block, or this function that I made over here, we have it forever looping a question of asking, tell me where I should go, grassland, forest, desert, tundra, freshwater, or marine. And then if we answer one of the questions with a expected answer, so if I answer marine, if I answer forest, grassland, desert, etc., then I'm going to switch the backdrop, broadcast that message, and then stop this loop. But if I don't answer any of these expected messages or these expected ecosystems, then at the very bottom here, I'm going to say that's not a valid answer. Please try again. After 3 seconds, I'm going to loop again to ask that question at the very top. If you need to take a look at any of the code is always going to be available on my profile, and that's linked in the description up here or down here, depending on where you're watching this. So make sure to check it out. Just click that See Inside button and you're able to see all of the code that I used in this project. Thank you for joining me in our lesson for today, and I'll see you all next week where we're going to be learning about making lists.